Hello record collecting friends all around the world. Welcome to my channel, Vinyl Stockholm. And on this channel I talk mostly about rare and obscure records from way back in the days. I always show the original pressings that I have been collecting for the last 15-20 years. And I try to include samples of the music and talk about the artist and just showing off cool records that I have in my collection and that I love. This is going to be a special episode because I'm only going to show you 7-inch singles, and 7-inch singles from 1978 to 1983. And these singles are not just awesome, they are also big influence on the indie music that was to come in the 80s. So all these records I'm going to show today are kind of Powerpop, DIY, post-punk, maybe new wave. Great music that foreshadow indie rock and indie pop. And what they also have in common is that they were all non-album tracks. So not released on any album at the time. They only came out on 7-inch singles. And if you know me, that's the way I collect. I only buy the original pressings the way they came out at the time. I'm not going for compilations or later pressings of singles. And what they also have in common is that they are fucking awesome. Super great music that everyone should hear. So let's just jump on this underground pop train and see where it takes us. The first single I'm gonna show is probably my favorite single in my entire collection, at least one of them. And I'm talking about Chris Bell, I Am the Cosmos, with the B-side You and Your Sister. Chris Bell, the founding member of Big Star, who left after they had released their first LP. And this single is the only single that he released during his lifetime. It's the backside. And here's the front. And this single was released in 1978, but it was recorded, I think, in 74 or 75, so it came out a little bit later. And it was released on a small label called Car Records. That looks like this. Chris Bell, he left Big Star after they had released their first album that flopped at the time. He put his heart and soul into that record, and when it didn't sell, he got really devastated, and also some conflict within the band with him and Alex Chilton. He left the band right after they had released it. And at that time he wasn't really feeling well, so he was for a moment hospitalized, and later on he went to Europe to try to find himself. And while he was in Europe, he recorded many songs, and I think he even recorded this, or parts of this. It's one of the most haunting, beautiful power pop singles you will ever hear. The single was mixed by Jeff Emick, Beatles recording engineer, and it really has this kind of late Abbey Road era Beatles vibe. Especially the guitar solo, that's really George Harrison-esque, I think. But it's one of those beautiful pop songs that really didn't make an impact at all at the time, but later on it has been a big favorite among lots of indie artists. I mean, in the 90s and the 80s, when Big Star got this first revival, many artists found Chris Bell and his music, with bands like Poses and Teenage Fan Club, etc. And also Replacements. They did this song called Alex Chilton that brought Big Star back into the indie scene. These days, tons of indie artists state Chris Bell and Big Star as influence on their music. But at the time, it just came out on this small label and disappeared. Should also say that Chris Bell tragically died a few weeks after this single was released, only 27 years old. He crashed his car into a tree, and this is what we got from him. But in the early 90s, all of his recordings from the 70s came on an LP called I Am the Cosmos that you should really check out. For me, this is one of my favorite singles ever, and I just love I Am the Cosmos by Chris Bell. I haven't even mentioned the B-side, You and Your Sister. That is equally good. Maybe even better. It's two absolutely fantastic tracks on one single. Chris Bell, I Am the Cosmos.
Every night I tell myself I am the cosmos. I am the wind. That don't get you back up again. Just when I was starting to feel okay, you're on the phone. I've been alone.
Chris Bell, I Am the Cosmos. What a great track. Now we're gonna move all the way to Australia, to a really obscure band, at least at the time obscure, band called The Scientists, with their amazing single Frantic Romantic that came out in 1979 on a small label. They came from Perth in Western Australia, and at the time this came out, they were playing some kind of garagey rock and roll, clearly inspired by punk, but also Powerpop leanings. So it's a catchy song with some amazing guitar hooks. This is a big rarity. I showed it in recent vinyl finds from last year when I got it, and came out on this small label, D.N.A. Records. It looks like this. So this is their debut single, and this lineup quickly changed after this single, changed their musical directory, and became more of a swampy garage rock thing in the 80s. And they have been often stated as an influence on like alternative rock bands like Nirvana and Mudhoney and bands talking about The Scientists. So they were a big influence on what was to come later on in the 90s. This is The Scientists from Australia with Frantic Romantic.
Met her at a dance, it was romance. Took her by the hand, it was romance. Gave her my drink, it was romance. I told her I loved her, it was romance. Kissed her lips.
Next stop on this Powerpop lo-fi DIY journey, we're going to England and a single called Language School by Tours. And this came out also in 1979, and it was actually a self-released single by the band. And it is like this, printed on this PVC cover, as you can see here. Just have like a white sheet in here. And it was printed in different colors. This is the purple one. I think the black one is the absolute first, but they all came out the same year. Self-released, Tours Records, I think they just put this out themselves. And it became kind of a underground hit in the UK. And John Peel loved it, and he apparently played it 50 nights in a row on his radio channel, and stating that this was the best single he has ever heard after Teenage Kicks by the Undertones. And the guitar riff is just drives you into the song immediately when you hear it. So it's super catchy and kind of fast, tight power pop punk song. Sounds like a mix of like Elvis Costello meets The Wire. This became like a cult hit, but it wasn't released on a proper big label. So after this, many major labels wanted to sign tours. So it almost became like this bidding war between Virgin and EMI and I don't know. And they eventually signed to Virgin and they released another single that I don't know, but I don't think it's nearly as good as this one. And the band quit after that single for some reason that I'm not aware of. But we still have this privately released single by Tours, Language School. Really great power pop punk DIY song. The next single I'm gonna show is from one of my favorite bands from the late 70s. And I've shown this band before, but not this single. And it's the Television Personalities with their single Smashing Time. As you can see there. It's just super charming and really catchy song about a couple coming down to London to tourist in London for a weekend. And they sing about like biking in Hyde Park and visiting London Tower and eating ice cream in the park, and they all had a smashing time, went to London. And this is like typical for Television Personalities. It's like a glimpse into England at the time, a bit sarcastic I would say with the lyrics here, and super charming lo-fi jangle pop. A lot of bands were influenced by Television Personalities later on. The whole like indie pop and the twee pop and the lo-fi pop and the C86 and bands like Beat Happening and the Pastels and a lot of bands like that were influenced by Television Personalities. And this song is like a nod to an old 1967 film called Smashing Time, about two girls coming to London for a weekend to hang out there, and they of course had a smashing time. So it's a little bit of this mid-60s mod revival kind of thing also, and they combined all those things with like the 60s songwriting with the post-punk attitude and the lo-fi recording style. So this is just amazing stuff. Smashing Time by Television Personalities.
Carson Jill came down to London for a weekend break, and I promised that I'd show her round the sights. We went to the Tower of London and Madame Tussauds, and then we saw the West End late at night. And she thought it was really good, and so did I. And she thought it was really good, and so did I.
Now let's move to the edge of the world, to New Zealand, to a small town called D.N.A. And I'm talking about Flying Nun records. And I just couldn't do this video without showing a record from Flying Nun, because the music that came in the early Flying Nun is like a template for indie music that would later come. And I'm gonna show you a really smashing single called Death and the Maiden by Verlaines. And this one was released in 1983. So the Verlaines, they were formed in Dunedin by a guy called Graham Downes. And he was very much into literature and poetry, and I think he became a college professor later on in his life. So already in this early stage he was incorporating like French poets and talking about stuff like that in his lyrics. And on this single he sings about the French poets Arthur Rimbaud and Paul Verlaine that had a infamous relationship where Paul Verlaine shot Arthur Rimbaud, and they actually sing about this. You'll only end up like Rimbaud, get shot by Verlaine, 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 Verlaine. So they sing about Paul Verlaine, and the band's name is Verlaines, but I don't think it had any connection. But this is a super catchy jangle pop, lo-fi pop, post-punk kind of song that's absolutely hooky, and it has some kind of strange chord progressions as well. So it's not just your 3-chord song. Intellectual and really nice lo-fi pop. And later on, the Verlaines kind of left this early D.N.A sound as they did on their first recordings and moved toward a more polished sound that I'm really not a big fan of. But this early Verlaine stuff is still really great, and this single is their masterpiece single, I would say. So let's listen to Death and the Maiden by Verlaines.
But I won't reject so long as you make sense. But I'm through the rules and the vague intentions. You should have talked to me, find better company. There's better people to know. You'll only end up like Rimbaud, get shot by Verlaine, 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 Verlaine.
So these were my singles that I want to show today. Great, great stuff, and all original pressings from back in the days. They were kind of foreshadowing and creating the template for indie music later on. So highly influential stuff from super great bands. And I just love to collect these DIY Powerpop post-punk records from late 70s, early 80s, and when it when the music transformed into indie rock or indie pop. It was kind of fun to show some singles. I have been showing too many LPs lately, but I collect equal amounts of singles and LPs, and I love to find these rare original vinyl singles. And I've been getting them over the years, so I have been collecting singles for a long time, and these all have a special place in my heart. And what's so great with single is that you can talk about a song and not an album, because singles are the song format. Anyway, people, thanks for tuning in as always. Be sure to subscribe, like and comment, and especially comment, because I really like to have this conversation with you. Can you please put down suggestions for me of other Powerpop, DIY, lo-fi, indie stuff before it was indie singles? Because I love to explore this genre, and I always like to explore and find new music. So please put down your suggestions with these types of music and these types of singles. Not only singles, also LPs. But hit me up with some cool suggestions. So thanks for tuning in to this episode, and until next time, I want you all to have a smashing time.